Hey YouTube, today is May 13th. I'm going to cover a story by J.H. Hubert, Ron Paul's Manifesto Against False Choice. How frustrating it must be to be Ron Paul. The Texas congressman and Republican presidential candidate always said there was no justification for war with Iraq, no weapons of mass destruction, no threat to the United States, and his colleagues in Congress and most of the American people ignored him. Ron Paul also saw we were headed for financial collapse and a runaway inflation because of the Federal Reserve Bank, and his colleagues in Congress and almost all of the American people ignored him. Now Americans realize the war was wrong and they want the troops to come home, but they still vote for candidates who won't promise to bring the troops home and who are ready or even eager to commit troops elsewhere. Now Ron Paul tells the Americans, now Americans know the economy is in a recession, if not depression, and inflation worries loom, but still they vote for candidates who offer no serious monetary reform. Apparently there is much educational work to be done, and now Ron Paul is taking up that challenge too. His new book, The Revolution, a Manifesto, presents his political philosophy and provides a blueprint for restoring a peaceful, prosperous American republic. Paul shows how the Republican politicians pull the wool over conservatives' eyes. While campaigning, they'll pick on isolated instances of government waste and promise to abolish them, leading voters to believe that they're supporting the small government candidate. But once in office, the politicians invariably support greatly increased spending in all other areas, and Paul writes, nothing changes. Democrats fool their voters too. They oppose Republican wars, at least at the election time, but they have a list of other wars they'd like to wage in different parts of the world, and nothing changes. Paul argues that voters need to reject the false choice between Republicans and Democrats. Whatever their superficial differences, both parties and their candidates will drive the country further down the path of ever bigger government, empire, and economic ruin. If Americans want to get something different from what they've always gotten in Washington, they need to demand radical changes now. The book explains what those changes should be. In foreign policy, Paul proposes bringing the troops home not only from Iraq, but from all places they're stationed around the world. He shows how this policy was of the Founding Fathers and explains why it would work today. He documents well his claim that we face terrorist threats only because of our Middle East meddling. When our government meddles around the world, it can stir up a hornet's nest and thereby jeopardize the safety of the American people, he writes. Recognizing that isn't a matter of siding with terrorists, it's just common sense. The book's penultimate chapter may be its most important, as it discusses what Paul calls the forbidden issue in American politics, our monetary system. People know we have a Federal Reserve and that it somehow affects our economy, but they know little about how it works. Paul clearly explains how the Fed's printing more money makes everyone's dollar worth less, and why higher prices then hurt workers long before their wages catch up. He also explains how the Federal Reserve's inflationary policy creates economic booms and busts. The solution? Stop printing more money and allow people to use money backed by gold and silver, as all our money was not so long ago. Will enough people read and heed Ron Paul's words to change our course? It's hard to say. One thing's certain though, if you always do what you've done, you'll always get what you've gotten. The failure to grasp the simple fact is a strong indicator of insanity. But for some time now, America has been in an insane asylum with the inmates running it. Isn't it time for the American people to wake up and take the crazies out of office and move them to the padded cell where they can't hurt themselves or anyone else? Ron Paul's book can go a long way in helping to accomplish that and a lot more. And that's what the crazies have such great fear of, and that's why the crazies have such great fear of Ron Paul and his revolution. You see, it's really pretty simple. Back when we, the people, had sovereignty, the taxation, whether it was controversial or not, was the only source of government funding. Therefore, the people It was the golden rule. People had the gold, we ruled. If we didn't like what government was doing, we would have a serious impact on whether or not they would get funded, whether they would get elected. Now that they print their own money, they don't need us anymore. And as a matter of fact, they've done the schoolyard drug dealer trip on America. Yeah, give it away free for a while and get everybody hooked. And then they're in, and you never get out. And to get out is a huge struggle, and one that you have to actually tear yourself away from, go through withdrawals, go through fear. But first you have to have an intervention. And everyone that goes through an intervention resents the person setting them down for the tough love session. And that's why we, as Ron Paul supporters, are getting the brunt of the criticism of Dr. Ron Paul's campaign. He is almost faultless. It's all on us. So we can take it, right? Right, YouTube? Right, Ron Paul delegates? I know I can take it, and I intend to take it all the way to Minnesota, if I am so blessed to be elected. If not, I will help get all or anyone else that can in to go that will speak for us, that will speak for Ron Paul. It's time to take our country back. We're not the crazy ones. Don't believe it. It's simply not true. You're seeing the light of day. It's awkward, it's difficult, and people you love may not believe you, but it is true. We're running a ghost ship here, and it is a fiction, running on empty. That's why we have no industry here anymore. And all this talk about UN and NATO bringing in NATO inspectors to see what flushed down your toilet and tax you on if you took 2 more craps than the day before. I mean, it's really getting serious. And this is taxation without representation. And it's a complete and utter empire that we have basically built out of the UN, the New World Order, the World Trade Organization, NATO. We'll put a stop to it. Just hang in there. It's not over until it's over. And even if the presidential election is over without the victory you hoped for, we have still come a long way. How could anybody hope to change and reverse a 50 to 90 year bad situation in 18 short months? It's not likely. A peaceful revolution is one that's going to take a little longer. Hang in there. Don't be discouraged.